Welcome to the LowCarbMD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor.
Hello and welcome back to the LowCarbMD podcast. Tro, we finally connect again, man. It's been too long. We've been like
I know
single, it looks like.
You know what's going on, but it's all right. You know, we're getting busy, man. People need medical attention, and so we try to do our best to connect. And sometimes we got to get amazing guests on.
Yeah, and sometimes we actually leave town sometimes and do stuff, so we can't always be here. But yeah, it's awesome when we get to be together again and we have a great guest. So it makes it even that much more fun because then we don't have to talk as much.
Yeah, listen, I got to be honest with you. You had two amazing people that you interviewed. Shaban is just outstatic, and you had those, two guests on the week before, which was just amazing. So listen, I'm so happy to be here today. We have basically a cool story, right? He's connected with Amy and with Eric Westman. He's put out a cookbook. Man, I had to get my wife away from his Instagram feed. I was like, you just can't look at it, okay? You cannot pay attention to it. It doesn't exist. Yeah,
thanks for the warning. I'll block it.
Yeah, you got to block it. We got to call the censors or something, No, it's Scott Parker. And then I find out, he runs a big charity and I want to hear all about it. So this is Scott Parker. He's the co-author with Eric Westman on the End Your Carb Confusion cookbook, which we're excited to have you here. And how do you, just help me understand, how do you end up connecting with Eric? So tell me about your journey into health and wellness and cooking, and then how you find Amy Berger and how you find Eric Westman, and just help me understand the story of how this all started before we get to the cookbook.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's a long story. So good job. We've blocked out a lot of time.
Yeah, we'll take the long story.
Yeah. So I started cooking when I was 15 in my stepdad's pub in Oxford. So I'm English by birth. I've been in South Africa now for nearly 6 years. So I'm from Essex in England. And I live in Cape Town. So I have a bit of a Cape Essex accent. So it's a bit bizarre. You're just going to have to deal with me. It's not English and it's not South African. It's this in-between accent. But at 15, I started cooking at my stepdad's pub. As kids, we would go up there for weekends and holidays, and we'd sort of get put to work, doing the dishes or waiting tables. And I wasn't so keen on waiting tables and being in the front around people. I wanted to be in the back and away from people. And I guess, I'm not an introvert, but I suppose as a kid, I kind of was. Didn't enjoy being in front of people and talking, holding plates of food. It seemed quite nerve-wracking and daunting. So spending time in the kitchen there and washing dishes and just watching chefs, take whole pieces of fish and whole pieces of meat and fillet them down and cut them and saute them and then turn them into these beautiful plates of food. I was just like, wow, this is insane. Like you do this for a job, like this is like bizarre. And, I just fell in love with the fact that you could create and you could do something, and the reactions of customers, and hearing like my brothers come back in and they say, oh my God, the customers loved that and that was awesome. And and it was just like, this is like mind-blowing for me. So after school, I went straight to Westminster College, where I studied for 3 years, and we didn't have a huge amount of money. So whilst I was at college, it was Monday to Friday. After college, I went to go and work in hotels in London. So I was still young at the time. In the UK, you can leave school at 16 and you can go on to higher education, whether that's sixth form or a college, which is specialist. So I picked college, and at Westminster, I worked in each year. I worked in a different place. I worked at the Grosvenor House Hotel, which was a 5-star hotel my first year, the Bentley, which was a 5-star in my second year. And in my third year, I was knocking on doors of Michelin-starred restaurants, and I was lucky enough to get an opportunity with Shane Osborne at Pied à Terre, which was a 2 Michelin-starred restaurant, and it really was the making of me. I was still a young kid, living and working in London at 18 and working in a 2 Michelin-starred restaurant, And I worked in.
What are you eating? I'm just curious. So what are you eating then, right? So like, okay, you're around the food industry, the restaurants, we know a ton of soybean oil, you know, the low quality ingredients, sometimes high quality ingredients. Even the best restaurants are using like, you know, some bizarre ingredients. So what are you eating at that time, you know, growing up, or, you know, what's going in your mouth? I'm just curious.
So honestly, at the time, and even learning and studying and all of my time in restaurants, the nutrition was never top of mind. What was top of mind was always just great quality food. And, you know, personally, what was I eating? Like pot noodles, like quick things, cheap things. I was earning next to no money. I was working my ass off. Like, I wasn't thinking about nutrition and my body and what I needed. And even now, looking back on it, and it'll become more apparent, like why the book came around is that, or why I'm so passionate around it, is like, you know, I was working in French restaurants where, you know, everything was packed full of butter and cream and fat and starch and carbohydrate, and it was potato laden. And, you know, it was kind of like, all you cared about was just great quality food. You know, you go to a 2 Michelin-star restaurant, you just want great quality food. That's it. You don't go there and think about actually, is it keto friendly, or you know how many calories are in this. And I wasn't thinking like that at the time either. And I think if you put me in that position now, that young kid, I would be a completely different chef, and I'd approach it completely differently, and the way I'd approach it. And that's like one of the biggest catalysts for the book, and sort of one of the things that, you know, I hope that people can see is that through the book is that everything I learned through cooking and traditional cooking, I've taken and I've made it approachable as one thing, and, you know, super easy to make, and stripped out, you know, all of those excess carbs that you didn't need. So I wasn't really focused on nutrition. I was just eating to get by. And I spent the best part of 8 years in Michelin kitchens, and I worked my way up to head chef of a 2 Michelin-star restaurant in Cambridge called Midsummer House. I was 21 at the time, so I was probably one of the youngest ever head chefs in the UK to be in a 2 Michelin-star restaurant. And you know, at the time, I was actually not eating well at all. I was like just burning the candle at both ends. I was working out all the hours under the sun. Where I could eat, I just like chow a sandwich or a burger, or, you know, whatever I could get my hands on. And, you know, like I keep coming back to it, at that time, it was never like a thing for me. I was just work. My career was just everything. And it actually got to a point where I burnt myself out. I was working so hard, and my body was just like, no, man, you've done this for so long and you're a kid. And actually, you didn't go to any 18th birthday party. You went to no 21st birthday party. You went to no weddings, man. You went to no funerals. You got no friends. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't carry on. Like, this isn't the life I want. And I looked at like my peers and, you know, people who'd own restaurants. And I was like, I don't want to dedicate my life to this. There's more to me. I can give so much more. So I left the industry at 22. And I went into working for a company called Oscar Mayer in London, who produced ready meals for all the big retailers. Waitrose.
Oscar Mayer? Did you say Oscar Mayer?
Oscar Mayer, yeah, not the sausage guys. I know you guys.
Yeah, we were thinking the same thing. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, Oscar Mayer, we know them. Yeah.
I actually knew you guys had a sausage company called Oscar Mayer, but no. There's a different one, and it was there where I really got exposed to. I mean, at high school I was playing rugby, so I went back to playing rugby. I started becoming more conscious around my health and my body and what I was eating, and there I was producing ready meals, but part of my remit was health meals, and I was looking at ranges for Waitrose and Sainsbury's and Tesco's, and really starting to understand more about the nutritional side of food as opposed to just food. And strangely enough, I think, you know, as the years have gone by, we're talking like this was now 10 years ago, I think restaurants are much more in tune or astute to around the nutritional value of food that they're serving you. But certainly when I was cooking, it's about just cooking really freaking great food, man. And you just put the greatest food out that you can, and you don't worry about the nutrition. You don't even think about it. And it would be so different now.
Can I just help me take a step back? I'm still trying to put myself in your shoes. You know, so here you are, young guy, you know, you're passionate about nutrition, passionate about cooking. but it sounds like, one, you're not taking care of yourself too much. Two, you're burning out. I want to also get a sense of, are you exercising? I mean, you're in your youth. What's going on then? Are you just kind of like 100% into this? And when you're making food for restaurants, right, is it really like, hey, I need this person to be happy? Like, how much thought goes into, wait a second, I need the highest possible quality ingredients. I need these people to feel full. Or is it, I need them to be happy, enjoy the food, and come back as a customer? I mean, help me understand this, because, when we look into how restaurants eventually become food companies, which eventually become big food, we see this recurring theme that all they care about is profits, right? And very few companies care about what they're actually giving to their customers, right? They don't care. So are you exercising? Where's your health? And then when you're in this field, what are you doing in terms of, I know that the taste and certainly the quality of the food you care about, but what about the quality of the ingredients?
So from high school, I was really athletic and really sporty, played rugby, I was on the athletics team, basketball, all the teams. But as soon as I went into cooking, everything stopped. I was working 16 to 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, and it's full on. So there is no time for exercise. You don't have the energy for exercise. You get one day off. You're mostly sleeping that one day or walking around like a zombie, like walking around London because you've got no money. You spend all your money like on the beers the night before. Like, it's a really tough industry to be in, especially as a youngster, and you kind of get sucked into that sort of way of working and that way of life. So everything was like incredibly unhealthy about what I did in that period of my life.
So self-help is gone. Self-help is completely gone. Mental health, physical health, it's like only your job. And what about the culture of health? Is there any culture of health? Is there any like, hey, we're making these food for these people, should we think about what we're actually giving to them? Like, should we think about not, the food and the food combinations and the disease we may or may not cause, and is there any thought of like, should we use flour, almond flour? Like, should I use, organic, not organic, grass-fed, not grass-fed? Like, or does the customer have to walk away happy and there's no other thought?
So I'm going to circle in your other question as well. So ingredients are paramount. Okay, the ingredients, you can make a bad meal with good ingredients, but you cannot make a good meal with bad ingredients. So ingredients for us is the most important thing. We will source and supply fish from Runjas market. That's the freshest possible fish you can buy. We'll get yuzus in from Japan. Ingredients really is the key foundation for any good quality restaurant. I mean, we're talking Michelin food. You don't compromise. You really do not. And simplicity comes with that. So if you're buying great quality ingredients, you don't need to overcomplicate it. You need to cook it simply and serve it and prepare it in a way that ingredient really is showcased. Now, go back to your question on the health aspect. I've walked out of many meals of Michelin standard feeling almost sick, that I'm just so full and overwhelmed with just a plethora of different, just like high fat ingredients or high carbohydrate ingredients. And you just go through this tasting menu that's just like bang, bang, carbohydrate. And then you finish with like 3 desserts. And it's like, I reflect on that and I'm like, wow, like, although it tastes good, you finish and you feel terrible. And you're like, well, what's nice about that? And I look back at those days and, even the staff meals that we would have as staff would be like, we'd call it pasta Ferrari, because we would have to make the pasta so quick. You don't have time, and you shove it in your face and you eat it so quickly. You don't have time to go from one job or another. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I am talking in the industry has moved on. And I know I've got a lot of friends still in the industry. And I know a lot of guys, especially the likes of Sat Bains, that really think about the food that they're feeding to their staff and think about more nutritional value of especially tasting menus in a restaurant environment, and how a customer is going to feel at the end of that tasting menu. But unfortunately, when I was cooking, like I say to you, it's heavily classically French trained, like mashed potatoes, pomme fondants, pomme soufflés. The potato is the cornerstone of French cooking. Without potato, what is it? And that's sort of where I was trained, and where I spent a lot of my career learning.
Hey, can I ask one more question? Can I ask one more question? In your career as a cook, okay, in your career as a cook, and it sounds like at the highest end restaurants we could possibly get to, amazing cook. Okay, can you help me understand? Does anybody use soybean oil there? Does anybody use refined oils? Does anybody use that?
So we would use things like vegetable oil and canola oil for cooking, for frying.
Got it.
And then the other sorts of oils, your extra virgin olive oils, your olive oils, or your finishing oils. Yeah. So
these highly refined oils, so somehow they're ending up in but mainly for high temperature cooking and frying, right? It sounds 100%. Like, got it. Okay, got it. And so this is at the finest. So, I mean, you can't get even higher. So the people most focused on quality are still using highly refined oils in their cooking, right? Okay, got it. I just wanted to, understand. Okay, so here you are.
Education, and I know that it's the education of it. It's just like that's what we've used forever, and that's what we're going to use forever.
But it hasn't been around forever, right? I mean, like these vegetable oils have made, and rapeseed oil is like a 40-year-old phenomenon, right? So they have been, right? So the butter and the cream are different, right? They're a little bit different, but so I always wonder, like, what is the culture behind that? So nobody's questioning, hey, we're just using this. So even though they're sourcing the highest possible quality fish, the highest possible quality cream and butter and freshest possible things, somehow they've accepted highly refined vegetable oils. Right. I find that kind of interesting, right? I mean, at the highest level. So, okay. So I didn't mean to interrupt. But so what happens next? Brian's itching to talk. Sorry, Brian. No,
it's a cost issue. I know people who own restaurants like, I just can't afford you're going to use pure olive oil to cook everything. Forget it, man. You're going to be broke. You have to charge too much. And so, it's that, and people aren't thinking about it. They're like, well, we're just going to, just like anything, if you're baking a cake, you're not saying, oh, I'm going to try to make this as healthy as possible. I want this to taste really good and people enjoy the experience. You're not in charge of their health. Or like they have to make their own health decisions at some point, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? So when did we went from in the house, grandma cooked it, right? And she cared about the taste because she wanted you to eat it, right? And she cared about your health. Right. She had a vested interest in keeping her family healthy, tasting it, loving the healthy food. And right. So she had to grandma had to make it taste good. Right. So
and it had to be from scratch. You had to get the good ingredients and make it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it had to be healthy. But now when you pair it away, you go to the restaurant and even further away, food companies, right? Like all of a sudden it's, hey, how did that happen? We're using highly refined oils. I always found that interesting. So, Scott, so you're using it. Are you thinking, and you probably don't even think twice about it. You're like, everybody's using this, everybody's frying potatoes like this, right? I might as well do the same thing.
It's just like medicine, Tro. We just do the same thing because that's what everyone's always done. You don't say, well, this doesn't
exactly.
Make sense, right? Yep. It's the same story everywhere.
Scott, yeah, and it comes to a point that you do, and now, later on in my career, there are opportunities to sort of question those, and I think that. You're right in what you're saying, and all the comments are right. It's cost, and then now you're going to say, cool, we're going to now use olive oil. Okay, well now we're going to put the price up 20%. The customer's not going to come back, and you're like, it's this constant battle, and we deal with it regularly in retail, it's really difficult because health, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So now we as a retailer here in South Africa as well, we only use free range eggs across absolutely everything that we do. And one of the conversations I had with Dr. Eric Westman when I started the book is that, I really want to push that, we need to be using organic and free range, and, we need to be sustainable. It's part of what we need, have a responsibility. And there is a part in the book, but his comments are, and they're valid. It's, not everybody can afford that, Scott. And actually what's more important is, wouldn't you rather have someone eating a chicken and eating proteins that they can afford, or you want to ostracize them and say, no man, you have to eat free range. And it's like, and it's a grapple. It really is. And I grappled with it for a while, and I rewrote the freaking paragraph 10 times, because I was like, I need to get my message across, but I also don't want to, I want to make it accessible. The food has to still be accessible.
Yeah, you're 100%. But I found it interesting, you're at these restaurants, at these very high quality focused restaurants at the highest end, you'd imagine that, yes, it has to be a business, but where does that line stop with the quality of the ingredients? Now, most people see the fish and kind of know the fish and the protein and the cream and that, right? They can get a sense of those flavors, but the oil, I don't think anybody pays attention to that. So, but it's interesting that, the way you describe the butter and the cream and the making things from scratch, right? Versus the Ferrari pasta, right? And yet this is like an area everybody's just disregarded, right? Like, it's just like, it's gone, right? And the other part of it is, you're right. When people go to a restaurant, are they even thinking about, how they're going to feel? Are they even concerned about that, right? And can they afford it? That's another thing, right? Can they afford those high quality items? It's a whole nother concept.
Yeah, and we just don't know as consumers. That's the problem. I was listening to Meat Mafia podcast, and they had a food expert on. He said, do you think that, when you get the nice fancy silver butter that's it's made, looks like ice cream in there? He goes, you think that's butter? He said, do you know what? Let me tell you what's in that. And you go, oh my gosh, it's margarine. Is what it is. And we're like, oh, I'm keto. I'll eat all this butter. And so if you get the tabs, it's different than if you get the fancy butter, right? It's a different thing. So there's so much stuff like that we just don't even think about, that we just said it's butter and you don't know. Like, look at butter popcorn, the popcorn they use in the movies. Is there butter in the popcorn?
No,
it's oil.
No, you know what? I went to Disney and my kids wanted popcorn. I was like, sure, I'll get them popcorn. I go to ask them. It's like partially hydrogenated soybean oil, salt, and like maltodextrin and popcorn,
Yeah.
And I think to myself, like, we know maltodextrin, what it does, it's, high glycemic index. The soybean oil, it literally causes insulin resistance. And look, at some degree, kids have to be kids. So of course I, get it for them and they have some, but when they come home, the quality of the food is high. But I just wondered if the culture cared about it. And it sounds like what you're saying is the culture didn't care about food quality, right? I mean, to some degree it did, but there were some areas like doctors, they care about people, but somehow they neglect nutrition, right? But it seems like even the people who are paid to care about nutrition, like, leave some areas unthought of. And this is just how people did it. And this is what was done. And I find that interesting. So how do you?
It's funny, a lot of it's like people are looking at like the meat, and they don't really. How many people ask, like, what kind of oil do you cook this in? No one asks that. Rare. I mean, some people will, but most people won't. And it's kind of like this surgeon I know. He would spend all this time closing the wound. It would take forever. And like, why the hell do you take so much time? He said, because that's what the patient's gonna see. If I do a shoddy job and just slam them shut, they're going to see that, and they're not going to know. They're going to think the rest of my surgery was bad. So I want that to look perfect, because they're going to have that scar the rest of their life, and they want to say, "Hey, look, this guy did a good job," right?
I used to train with an OBGYN who literally threaded the needle, right? Like sewed the skin shut like he was sewing a piece of expensive garment. But help me understand. Okay, Scott. So here you are, you're in this industry and you're like, I am not fulfilled. I want more. And so where does more take you? Because you go into philanthropy and you go deeper, it sounds like, into nutrition. So I'm curious to see how each of those plays out.
What happened? What changed?
Wait. And somehow you end up on the cover of Men's Health. So I want to hear each one of those. So, all right, how does that all happen?
So the next 5 years I spent in manufacturing with Oscar Mayer and developing ready meals across many different categories. And that's where I really got really nailed into nutrition and got back playing rugby and got back into my fitness and really dialed in who I wanted to be. And within that, started doing a lot of charity work where I was auctioned off at different auctions to go and cook at people's houses and raise money for different things, which was all good and well at the time, and I had a really great job. But after 5 years, I kind of was like, there needs to be something else now. So after the 5 years, I married my wife, South African. I came over to South Africa and got a job with Woolworths, where I started in sort of category and working in prepared foods and really starting to do a bit more charity work. And then it was the beginning of lockdown last year, where I ended up in hospital, in ICU for a week. They had found clots in my heart, which was pretty nasty stuff, pulmonary embolism. And the doctor sort of phoned me after doing all these tests, and he said to me, look, don't move. You know, we found clots in your heart. We put you onto Clexane. You know, it's a bit peculiar because you're young, fit, and, you know, this shouldn't really be happening to someone like you, sort of thing. So I kind of took stock of everything.
Brian,
my whole life.
No comment.
Keep
I
it
plead
cool,
the fifth.
Brian.
I'm not saying nothing, man.
Cool, Brian. Okay.
No questions here.
Okay. So that's unfortunate, man. We're sorry to hear that. We don't mean to make light of it.
No, I'm not making light at all. No.
Were you all right? So now you're in the ICU. They put you on blood thinners, I'm sure, right? I mean, this is like a huge. You're probably there for a couple of days, right?
I was there for a week, yeah, and then was let out, and they put me onto chronic blood thinners on Xarelto. And I suppose it was whilst I was in hospital, I sort of said to myself, you know,
viewers a little bit about what's going on. So a pulmonary embolism, guys, is a clot that usually starts in the lower extremities and moves its way up, although it could start right in the lungs. It makes its way to the lungs, and it gets stuck in the kind of it puts pressure on one side of the heart, right? So it can even the clot can extend into the heart. And this is usually caused by a clot. It's been reported, you know, certain viruses can increase your likelihood of a clot. Certain, you know, other treatments may increase your likelihood of clot. And the main treatment for most clots, we don't know why it happens, and we treat it with a blood thinner, right? Okay, we treat it with a blood thinner, and usually it's treated for about 3 to 6 months. Sometimes you may stay on longer, and the treatment is a blood thinner.
Yeah, we usually see that after trauma or after long car rides or plane rides or surgery, things like that, where you're sedentary.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, absolutely. The sedentary is a big risk factor. Long travel is a big risk factor. You know, family history, genetic factors are another risk factor. Here's the interesting thing about the medication you're on, Xarelto. The company that did the trial for Xarelto, it was called the Rocket AF trial, which is the first trial they did. They've done multiple other trials since then. So Xarelto is actually the same chemical as the tooth of a tick. Okay. No, I'm sorry, the tooth of a leech. Okay. So it's actually, they found Xarelto from the tooth of a leech, it's rivaroxaban, and they isolated it and they amplified it and they used it as a drug. The first trial, which is how they got approval, okay, and this was never looked into, okay, the INR, the devices they used for checking how thin the blood, how thin the blood was in the control group that was on the old drug we used, warfarin, right? They were comparing the two in the trial. The device they used for that entire trial was recalled for inaccuracy. They never recalled the trial, Brian, Rocket AF, which was the main trial used to approve this drug. Now the drug works, and we've used it a lot.
You're saying there's shady stuff happening in medicine? Come on, Tro, man.
No,
I'm
I'm
not
just
buying that.
things like this, you know.
That's incredible. I didn't know that.
No, I still use
it.
We still use it. There's multiple other, you know, trials that they did that showed a similar effect, but that was the main trial how I got approval. And then, you know, nobody looked into it. It was like two separate worlds, and there was nobody connecting the dots. But anyway, so Scott, you're on a blood thinner, out of ICU, and holy shit,
That's scary, man.
You must be scared out of your mind.
Yeah, it was a really scary time. And I suppose, you know, I look back on it now, and it is what it was, but it was pretty life-changing for me. And I kind of sort of said to myself, like, I've got to where I've got to in my life, but I actually haven't done anything to help anyone. And I don't really have much of a legacy, you know, head chef of a 2 Michelin-starred restaurant, you know, produced some really great food, done a little bit of charity work, but actually haven't really done anything to lay a legacy down. And what do I want to be known for? And all these questions come through your head, like when you hear this sort of stuff. So I took the opportunity when lockdown started to start a feeding scheme. And this will all tie into the whole story. And we managed to get in, and in lockdown here in South Africa, there was nobody allowed on the streets. They literally put the army on the streets. You staged in your house, and that was it. The only people who were allowed out and about were people who are critical to the economy, and to be able to start a feeding scheme that was deemed critical. So we started a feeding scheme at head office where it was completely closed, used my development kitchens, and we started with a premise to cook 60 meals a week. Within a space of a month, we'd gone up to 10,000 meals per week. And then it just grew. It grew so big, it's now become, in September, we will be 2 million meals. I've employed 30 staff that go through me. I've started a cooking school. I've built a roof garden. I have, people now completing this circular economy of what sustainability should be and training them to be chefs. Now,
that's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So since
cool.
since the lockdowns have opened up a bit, it hasn't affected the meals.
No, so what happened was it became so big that business, Woolworths, who I work for, were kind of like, well, we can't stop this now, because we were actually doing 15,000 meals a week at that stage. And I brought in students and I was paying students within a budget. I'd opened a deli to create revenue to be able to help sustain this. The roof garden and then produced vegetables to sustain that. So it became sort of this circular economy of helping people and growing food and giving food. And it wasn't just handing out food. And that's sort of where we got to after a year, was like we were just giving food, and everything was starting to open up, and you can't just keep giving food. It's not the sustainable solution. And that's where we started bringing students back in and helping with this sort of program.
Help me understand. So I get the culinary inspiration, and now you're thinking about your legacy and kind of doing more work like you want to serve your community, it sounds like. And I'm so inspired by that. And I relate to that in such a deep level. But how do you get into deep nutrition? It sounds like you knew nutrition. How do you get into the medical side of it, or not even, how do you link up with, how do you make that connection? Because really, if you're thinking about sustainability, you should be, thinking about grasshoppers and, insects. So that's like the way commonly that sustainability is thought about. And we've talked about the errors of that. So how do you find yourself down this rabbit hole, going to Eric Westman, Amy Berger? How do you, because that's not something I think that just happens.
So that started through meeting a guy called Glenn Fink, who is a big part of Adapt to Your Life Academy. He has a platform where they've got people coming on and they do talks with Dr. Eric Westman on keto. And he said to me, I met him in the gym actually, and he said to me, look, this is the platform and we'd love to have a chat with you and see if you could start producing some recipes for us, start doing some online cooking sort of courses for his audience. So I spoke with Dr. Eric Westman and sort of read his first book, Your Carb Confusion, and started to understand the different phasing and what he was trying to achieve. And it was a much finer detail of what I also understood at the time of what keto was, because keto in this country with Tim Noakes, which is, the guy you're talking about earlier, Tim Noakes was a big advocate for high fat, high protein diets. And where it kind of differs slightly with Dr. Eric Westman's is it's not necessarily so much high fat, but there's certainly the high protein and the lower carbohydrate. So I sort of got involved with that and started to try and tinker with recipes and started making recipes and found it in the beginning challenging but exciting. I was really excited to work out how could I create really tasty food that was still very low in carbohydrate and ticking all the right boxes, and that's sort of where we started. So I started doing monthly cook-alongs live. We used to do them live. This was 18 months ago, live cook-alongs, and after sort of 6 months he said to me, the first book's done really well, and your recipes are really working very well. People understand them, they're not complicated. What's your thoughts on doing a full book? Which is pretty daunting at the time, because actually I was like, there's like so much I don't know, so I can't do this alone. And that's where Amy came in, and Amy was just like the most incredible human. And she was just so amazing at just saying, don't worry, Scott, I've got you, I can help you. And we worked through the recipes, so I'd write the recipes and she'd almost sort of edit them for me, and go through her lens and send them back. And, we got to a point where we got into a really good rhythm, and she was just fantastic. She helped me through the whole thing. And that's sort of where we got to, and that's how we were able to come up with the book. And we're still doing the online cooking classes each month, and it's now become something that's a lot more, it's become my lifestyle. Actually, I've adopted it. His phase 1 I actually went on to for the first 2 months this year. I felt that it's the right thing to do, is I have to experience his phases and how my body reacts, so I can talk with authority. And I've gone through all of the 3 phases, and I kind of sit in phase 3, but I don't eat as much carbohydrate as I used to. I still train hard, and I feel the best I've ever felt.
Can I ask you a question? So when you dropped your carbohydrate for the first time, when was that? When was it when you're like, all right, I'm going to go to phase 1 and see what this is all about? When was that? January. Okay. So January, you're like, I'm going to do 30 grams of carbohydrate or less. And you did that for like a month or 2 months. How long did you do it for?
I did that for 8 weeks.
8 weeks. Okay. So for somebody who likes the gym, right, and likes to work out, what happened to you? Walk me through and walk me through making it a reality, and what did you feel?
Yeah, the first 2 to 3 weeks were tough. I felt lethargic. Felt that I wasn't able to, and I train every day. I wasn't training as well. I felt cloudy and foggy. I needed to increase a lot of my protein because of my overall eating. I was missing that extra carbohydrate, so I needed to subsidize that. So I was eating a lot more. I was buying in packs and packs of chicken breasts and bacon and steaks, and it became actually very difficult for me to sustain training the way I was. I wouldn't recommend it. But that being said, after the 3 weeks, I kind of had this like freshness. I was like, wow, I feel great actually. And I was moving well, and I sustained it for a long period. I became super lean, the leanest I've ever been. But it just got to a point where I did it for the 8 weeks. I felt the way I felt, and I was like, actually, it's becoming very expensive because I need to eat all of these proteins to sustain the way I'm training. And it became a bit too much. So I moved on to phase 2, started incorporating more carbohydrates. Again, when I started incorporating more carbohydrates, I kind of felt lethargic again, but sort of got over that dip and came out the other side. And now I'm sitting, probably around 100, 120 carb a day.
Right, which is still fairly low. So you went down to 20 grams of carbohydrates, felt lousy. Hopefully you added back some salt, and then something switched on where eventually you had more, a little bit more pep in your step. So that's called adaptation, right? And we know anything under 3 weeks, exercise performance suffers. We know that. And you have to increase salt, you have to increase water, take magnesium, sometimes those things will help. But then you felt great. Now you're sitting at the end of the 8 weeks and you're at the leanest leanest you've ever been. And this is a guy who's been on the cover of Men's Health. So you were really shredded, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was by far the best I've ever looked.
Okay. And how did you feel just at the end of 8 weeks? Were you like, I can see why people do this? How was your appetite? Did you notice any other changes in your gut, your mental health, anything?
Gut wise, I don't know how graphic you want to be, but my stools were great. Like I felt like I wasn't going to the toilet as much, and when I was, it wasn't bad. I felt that my bowel movement was great. I felt that, I woke up and I didn't snooze. I was like up, fresh, ready to go. I was sleeping better. I was getting really good deep sleep, and just more alert all day, and felt fresh. It's fresher, more alert. I think, the only downsides, like there's only so much chicken and beef that I could have kept eating. And that's only because I was training. If I wasn't training, I wouldn't need to eat as much. So it wouldn't have been much of a problem for me. And my job, I eat for a living. That's technically what I do now, is I eat for a living.
Okay, so you found it a little bit there. So listen, I know a great cookbook you can use to change up the variety of your diet. You know, listen. So okay, here you are at 8 weeks, and then your training volume's so high, so you add back some carbohydrates, but it just sounds like you don't go back to what you were doing before. It sounds like you keep your carbohydrates fairly low. So
Yeah.
why if you felt so good?
Because I mean, wanted more variety in my diet to start with.
What did you
and that's
What did you miss? I'm curious. What was like the first thing you missed? What was the first thing you ate when you went from phase 2 to phase 3 or phase 1 to phase 3?
a croissant. It was a croissant. I can't tell you how much I enjoy a croissant.
Croissant diet, Tro. We know about that.
Yeah. Letting starch in. You want to hear something interesting, Brian? I know I've been yapping.
It's all fat, man.
Yeah, I know I've been yapping so much. So when you take butter or lard or olive oil, right, it releases a hormone when you eat it alone called GLP-1. And
Okay.
GLP-1 goes to your brain and says you're full, right? And GLP-1 goes to your stomach. It keeps food in your stomach longer, right? In fact, it works so well, we have a drug that literally acts like this that causes 20% weight loss. But when you have fat alone or with a protein, you get a ton of GLP released. If you add a carbohydrate, a starch to that fat, the GLP increase disappears, completely disappears. Meaning that's why you love a croissant. Not only is it that carb fat combination hitting that part of your brain that says this is awesome, it actually makes you want more food, right? Which is kind of like it makes your food enjoyment way up higher. It makes you able to eat more. So for somebody like you, who's very lean, that's great. For somebody like me and Brian, who tend to, put on some pounds fairly easily, that croissant is like a deadly combination, anyway. But so you go back, you have a croissant, and does it all come rushing back, the weight, or what happens? How do you, or you kind of maintain where you're at?
Yeah, maintain. I think that's, it's like maintain like a bit of weight. I obviously wasn't as lean as I was. But, I didn't go straight up, I kind of dialed into it.
But you put on some muscle mass in the interim too, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So your carbs are just going to your muscle. Who cares, right?
Well, but it's
if
also
you have muscle mass.
It's a funny thing to see that body transformation, and I've never ever dialed in that closely as I did during that sort of phase, and you could see it. But it was more regardless of the muscle mass, it was the feelings. I really started to understand what the carbohydrates and sugars were doing to me, and the way it was making me feel. And it was like, actually, do I necessarily need that or want that in my life? And not to say that I don't now. I still enjoy a beer or a glass of wine, but now I understand what it's doing to my body.
Did it create any space between you and food? Did you find that your hunger got mitigated? Did you feel like something changed in terms of your appetite?
Like the cravings and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, funny enough, actually, now, I used to crave a lot of things, but now I actually had no cravings at all once I was on this high protein diet. Like I wasn't craving anything after a phase. I was like actually just pretty happy, and protein satiety enough anyway, so you'd eat what you need. And I wasn't eating big meals, so I wouldn't have a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner. So I'd have like smaller meals. So I'd have like probably 5 or 6 eggs for breakfast, and then for a snack, I'd have, some like biltong.
Hold on, can I stop you here? It's funny, like the bodybuilder approach versus the chronically in our practice, right? We have people who want to lose weight, right? Brian, when you ask somebody who has severe obesity, how many eggs is normal, right? What would they say to you? 2, right? And here we have like the leanest bodybuilder possible, like a guy in a Men's Health magazine saying, I had small meals. It was 5 eggs. What does that tell you about the psychology of weight, huh? So what does that tell you about it? Anyway, so
because he's thinking of fueling and getting enough protein in and getting bigger, and everyone else is trying to get smaller. You go, okay, I have to restrict. That's just what we think always.
I know, but it's funny. It's funny. It's like amazing the different way people think. You know, that it's just every single patient with obesity I've seen, when I ask them how many eggs are normal, they'll say 2, right? Maybe 3, right? Like that's normal. That's what they perceive as normal. And here we have somebody who's basically at elite level body composition, right? And really understands food. And how many, you know, he's like, oh, I ate a lot of small meals. Eggs was 5 eggs, you know, breakfast was 5 eggs. Right. I mean, which is, it's interesting to hear.
Yeah, you look at the calories of 5 eggs versus a bowl of cereal with milk, right? Like Lucky Charms, and see how many calories in that in a comparison when you're going to get hungry again.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So that's a small meal. I like that. You know, I like that. That's a small. So what was a big meal then? You know, what does a big meal look like for you?
I'd be a big steak. You know, I love a good steak. So, you know,
That's
like
how
tonight,
much, how big, yeah.
like tonight, yeah, I've got a steak waiting on the side, coming up to temperature. So probably about pounds. Wow. So grams, so about half a kilo.
Half a kilo. So about a pound, which is a good size steak. You know, it's a little more than a pound and a quarter, something like that. That's a pretty good size steak. What's your favorite cut?
Sirloin on the bone with the fat, but our sirloin is slightly different to yours. Yours is a strip loin, so we keep our sirloin completely on the bone, and then it's got the fat cap around the outside. Oh, and I always start by cooking to render the fat down first, and then you flip it over and you let the steak cook in its own fat.
Ah, so you cook the fat side first. And then
is this in the book?
Yeah.
It is in the book.
All right, look at that. Now let's transition. I want to hear, what are your recipes? What's your favorite ones from the book?
Yeah, give me the one we should do.
Yeah, so look, the book is pitched at so many different levels. So there's for complete beginners, and I show you how to poach an egg, how to boil an egg, how to fry an egg, how to make the perfect scrambled egg. And then I go all the way through to, you know, cooking the perfect steaks in all different cuts of steak and what they do and how tough they are and the temperatures you must take them to. And then I've got brilliant breakfast ideas in there. The roast chicken is a bit more advanced. So I love a good roast chicken. I'm British. A roast dinner is my favorite. So in there, you've got like how you're going to brine it, how you dry it out, how you get the crispiest skin and keep it succulent. And it's a fail-safe method. So it's pitched at all different levels, you know, complete beginners. Most of the recipes are 5, 6, 7 ingredients maximum, 1 pan cooking or 1 tray. And I think that was part of the challenge for me, was how do I get restaurant quality food, like, but make it easy for people to pick up a book and go, that's not intimidating. I can do that. There's 6 points there. There's 6 ingredients there. I need 1 pan and off I go. That's it.
And that's huge, because some of these recipes are so complicated. People are like, I don't have 5 hours to cook. I want to just like make something for my family and get on with my life. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. And you asked me to pick my favorite. That's like picking a child. I can't do it. There's so many. They all have stories as well.
It just depends on the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, today is steak.
Today it's steak.
Listen,
yeah, that's great.
Guys, this is End Your Carb Confusion Cookbook. This is going to be great. We can't wait for it. It came out. It just came out, right? It just came out, right? Yeah, a couple days ago. I know we weren't sure if we're going to get you on in time, but Scott, this has been awesome. Where can people find you, find the book, and how do people reach out to you?
So the book is available on Amazon. It's on Indian Bound and Barnes & Noble in the States and Canada, and the rest of Europe available on Amazon. And you can reach out to me on my Instagram, which is Scott Parker 1987, or on my Twitter, which is Scott_Fricker. So I'm happy to help, and I'd love to hear if people have bought the book and how they've created, you know, different iterations of my recipes. It'd be lovely to see.
Awesome.
It's bugging me before we go. When you got auctioned off, how much did you get to be auctioned off?
The biggest was £6,000.
Sheesh, Tro and I tried that. We got $5.85. He got $5. I got 85 cents. So I think we're way behind you.
I think you're worth way more, guys. Way more.
My goodness.
Is modern day society, a chef can get auctioned off from people that's more than people who save lives. You guys save lives.
You're saving lives. Like your book will save lives. I think that's the thing is we work together, right? We all have our own tools, and we need tools like this to help.
A good butcher and a good cook, you may never need a good doctor. So that's my philosophy here. So Brian, always a pleasure. Scott, always a pleasure. I know we both have hard outs.
Yeah, go get your steak. Thanks so much for joining us. This is awesome. Thanks so much. And good luck with all your good work you're doing of creating meals and sustainable garden and all that. That's awesome stuff. That's really cool.
Just don't get into the crickets and just stay out of that, okay? Promise us.
Yeah.
Yeah.